Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, getting ready for the Red Raiders to hit the road and another effort to get that road monkey that has now gone gorilla mode off their back. We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you once again as we are hitting the midway point of the week, rolling into a late night throwdown with the Arizona Wildcats. 10 o'clock God's time kickoff from the desert. And as we have seen Texas Tech only make one excursion so far this year, we haven't had a ton of reason to get back to this part of the conversation, but we'll dive into a little bit of what has been a road monkey and possibly grown into something larger, I guess, over the last couple of years for Texas Tech. We'll hear from Red Raider running back Tahj Brooks on his thoughts as to how the team is looking to approach that this weekend. And I want to get to Texas Tech offensive coordinator Zach Kittley, going back to a oldie but a goodie, a popular conversation, fourth down wisdom, and maybe something sort of evolving there and how that's impacted maybe the way that you're approaching some earlier downs. So we'll get to that coming up in just a moment. But Chris, obviously you've restored some home field advantage in the McGuire era. You've been very, very tough to beat once again there, and that's been good to see, something that had to happen as you look to restore the pulse of the program overall. But you have not found that same success on the road. Now it's very difficult to win on the road, so it's not some baseline expectation that you show up and just leave the house and go be good everywhere. But it has kind of grown into a consistent talking point, obviously, and justifiably so. But I'm wondering kind of internally, you know, how you view it from a team perspective. Has it become something that's bigger than it should be? Is it something that, you know, maybe is more a fan conversation, not so much a player or coach conversation? How do you think here in year three, what kind of context would you put that in?
It's a big enough deal to where Joey McGuire thought about it enough in the offseason. They tried to like talk to as many people as they could and kind of formulate, are they doing things right or wrong, or what can we do to prepare ourselves for road games better? Because, I mean, the bottom line is, if you want to get to where you want to go, you have to be able to win and win consistently on the road. You don't have to win them all per se, but you need to win a lot of them. And when you're 3-9, I mean, Joey understands that. He's not naive to the situation. I mean, it's you know, Iowa State in year one, Kansas and in Waco last year, and that's really it. And you've had, you know, a non-conference loss on the road in each of the first 3 years, NC State, then Wyoming, and then obviously this year when you went up to Pullman. But in 3 of your next 4 are on the road, and like look at it from this standpoint. I mean, who's in first place in the Big 12 right now? Well, it's you, Arizona, Colorado, BYU. Arizona's only 1-0, but I guess the 3 2-0 teams. But you're the only one of those 3 that hasn't won a road game.
Yeah.
And if you want to be taken seriously as a legit contender, your show's got to travel. I mean, go like what Colorado did in Orlando, what BYU did in Waco, what Utah did in Stillwater 2 weeks ago, what TCU did at Arrowhead. I mean, you've just got to be able to go figure out ways to win some games on the road, and 3 of your next 4 on the road, like we said. So that's the harsh reality. Now, to answer your point or question, to make a point about the way you should view it, I think they are trying to internally. You don't want to be so, oh no, road game, or like this is right. This is massive game. This is everything. Because then you start to try to do too much, you start to press, or you get out of what you need to do. So I think they've tried to address it They know it's a thing, coaching staff wise, certainly. And remember my story about Dan Campbell. Should we tell that again about?
Yeah. Refresh our memory for those that have forgotten.
Yeah, I think so one of the conversations Joey had in the offseason back in the spring was he went to go see the Lions, Dan Campbell. They've known each other for a long time. Dan Campbell is a Texas boy from, I think, right outside the Metroplex, and obviously played at A&M and then played for the Cowboys and all that stuff. But he's doing a really good job with the Lions right now. And one of the, so I think he was just picking different people's brain. But one of the stories he told me on his show was Dan Campbell said, make your practices so much harder than the games. Well, yeah, everybody tries to do that. But like, what do you mean by that, Coach Campbell? And so Joey said, he just told me, he goes, almost make it unfair. Almost make it like in these team periods where you're just like unofficiating fairly. You're stacking the rules or the situation to the point where everybody's mad at you after it's over. And to where you're being unfair with a PI call or a holding call after a score, whatever it may be. And you get everybody frustrated and you've got these circumstances on the line for who wins the team period, and you just get everybody mad at he goes, I got everybody mad at me. And he said, and then after it was over, you kind of explained to him, see, this is how it is on the road. It's not going to be fair. It's not going to be, you're going to get hosed. I think obviously, the folks from Cincinnati probably felt like that they got hosed on the non-targeting call toward the end.
I think screwed was actually the word from the head coach, literally.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we have had our own issues of being hosed or screwed on the road but that's the reality of it. Sometimes you don't get that break or that bang bang call or whatever, and figure it out. Find a way. And like the margins for error or just the margins in general are so small, because if Cincinnati makes a couple of field goals last week, here we are having much different conversations this week. Everything around here sucks. You feel terrible. You're like, are we ever going to win again? And they're feeling riding high on it. And that's just based off of 2 kicks, much less all the other stuff that could have gone into it. So it's just, and 2 of those 3 wins you've had on the road, they were, one was a comeback win in Kansas, which was the other one was a ball control game, field position game there in 0-degree temperatures in Iowa State, but you just kind of figured it out, made just enough plays. And my guess is that's how this weekend will be. Is a very close competitive game where somebody screws up a few times less or somebody makes a few more plays than the other guy.
Chris, as you look back, throughout the years and Red Raider football, I'm wondering if there's a team that stands out to you as being really good on the road. I guess there's one obvious answer with one really, really good team. But not just because I want to hear about, I remember this, but more specifically, what do you think those teams that have found success on the road did well, or what did they have that was a part of their sort of profile that you think gave them the chance to be successful? And maybe aside from just incredible talent, because I know that helps also. But there's got to be some more that goes into it, right?
I go with a couple of coaches, and that's why they were picked to do really well in the league this year. And these are programs we're very familiar with, but they've been very consistent, which is what you're trying to be. And that's Chris Kleiman in Kansas State and then Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. And typically what those teams have done, big picture, and this is kind of a blueprint for you, don't go and screw a bunch of stuff up like you did in Pullman, to where, I think that, how many toes did you have left after,
right,
the trip to Pullman, starting with fumbling the opening kickoff. But both of those teams are traditionally either average to really good, and somewhere that they're not bad, but on special teams, okay? They make their kicks, they maybe get a return, they block something, whatever. That's typically, that's safe. But you know what else they do typically? And if you listen to Joey really close, he's telling you, we got to play better defense on the road. We have to, if we want to get to 3-0 in the league, we got to play better defense. What have Kansas State and Oklahoma State typically done? And there was times when Oklahoma State wasn't all world defensively, but it's like they were leading the country in turnover margin or the takeaway category.
Right.
So they were very opportunistic. And then the other thing that I think is common between those two programs, it's what you have in number 28. That, like, good defense and a running game typically travels, and it makes up and can mask a lot of deficiencies. I would say this weekend too, like it's what I said before you went to Pullman. Your quarterback needs to play well. He can make up for some issues elsewhere if your quarterback plays well. However, a good running game allows for that to happen. Good defense kind of covers it up if it doesn't, or if you're not getting the running game going, or your quarterback's having a bad day. And then he's talked about this, but those are some common, so don't screw it up. Be able to run it and play, either good / opportunistic defense. Which maybe translates into turnovers, but that's kind of the recipe in my opinion. Yeah. And he's saying this week. That's really what. Now, all easier said than done. All very easy to say, very hard to get done.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like historically some of those things you mentioned there. You lean on whether home or away to make you a consistent team. That beginning with defensive effort. Like you would talk about in other sports, if a shot is not going to fall or travel home or away, you got some defense to lean on. If you're thinking about the hardwood, or if we're thinking about obviously what's happening here on the gridiron plays out in a similar way, home or away, defense is going to give you something to lean on. So I'd like to try me a little bit of that defense this weekend, opportunistic or otherwise, because both of those varieties can get you where you want to go, I think. Speaking of the running game, however, let's take a listen to Texas Tech running back Tahj Brooks talking about the team's approach to this road trip coming up on Saturday. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. Of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Take a listen to Texas Tech running back Tahj Brooks talking about the team's approach to this road trip coming up on Saturday.
Really just preaching this week as we're going playing in a home game. We don't need to make it bigger than what it is. We don't need to make it as, oh, it's just a away game. We got to just preach as just going in this week as we play at home. Keeping your routine the same, being consistent with that, and just really just practicing hard this week, because we're going against a great Arizona team.
Chris, I'm not real familiar. I guess you've made a trip out there, but with some of these newcomers to the Big 12 Conference, like, if you go to Manhattan, difficult environment. If you go to Ames, it's going to be a difficult environment. Stillwater, oftentimes Morgantown. I'm not so familiar with some of these you'll visit as far as the newcomers, but I guess it wasn't too long ago you were in Tucson. What'd you make of the Wildcat environment?
Yeah, I was there in 2019. It's okay. It's not, just super memorable, but I mean, their stadium holds about 50,000 is capacity, so it's not as big as yours. I would assume that it would be full or close to full, but that shouldn't affect you a ton. Noise or road or whatever. I mean, there was only, I think about 30,000 in Pullman, or about 28 or whatever it was. And it was loud, but it's the funny thing about the road is that, and I heard multiple players say that yesterday with the media availability that, the field's the same. It's like the Normandale and Hoosiers, man.
Right.
Of course, the same 10-foot. They were kind of going through that. It's the same dimensions, and we just have to figure out a way to have that But typically in sports, what happens for whatever reason. This translates to a lot of sports, specifically the two that I am involved with the most in football and basketball. Typically, you're what I would term like role player. For whatever reason, they play better at home than they do on the road. Your good players typically play the same. Okay, whatever. That's what makes them great. But your role players, there's more of a swing. And again, that's a big picture statement, but you need some of your guys that you're not necessarily counting on to play at the level that they play at home and do it away from home. Whereas you already kind of know based on, and it's not the case. That's not a blanket statement where it's just 100% fact across the board. There's certainly examples to the contrary every single Saturday. I'm just saying, generally speaking, but you need some of your guys, because you blow a coverage maybe a little bit more, you miss a tackle maybe a bit more, you can't hear as well, you can't, I don't know, whatever it may be. And it's funny I say that about like defensive communication, because actually you can hear much better on the road than you can at home, because they're quiet in the opposing stadium when the other team's on offense. Whereas at home, that's when they're the loudest, and you got your music blaring and all kinds of stuff going on. So hopefully that'll help a younger secondary in this case. But because I thought your secondary played pretty good in that first road game, it was just they adjusted and all those things. And John Mateer just had a bit of a career night, and you've got to have an answer, because you're going to deal with, an NFL prospect or two going against Arizona, really on both sides of the ball. They've got the reigning Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week in Takario Davis, who's a 6'4" corner, first or second round pick. They've got Teteroa McMillan, who's probably the first receiver taken. And, that's what great players can overcome a lot, but you need some of your role players or some of the guys that we're not talking about weekly to just play at the same level. Don't be superhuman. Just play at the same level that you do on a Saturday night at Jones Stadium.
Would be a great place to start a new trend as far as road success is concerned, and a great opportunity, certainly resume-wise. And I don't know that we're even interested in a resume at this point in time. You're just trying to get a win. But given what Arizona did a week ago on the road themselves at Utah, a great opportunity for Texas Tech to put an early season stamp on the resume as far as a quality victory is concerned. As we wrap up the conversation, I want to get to something on the offensive side of the ball I thought was interesting to hear discussed from Coach McGuire and offensive coordinator Zach Kittley. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. As we wrap up the conversation, I want to get to something on the offensive side of the ball I thought was interesting to hear discussed from Coach McGuire and offensive coordinator Zach Kittley. And that was relating to, I guess, I hate to confine it just to fourth down wisdom or fourth down itself, because it really obviously impacts everything. So it's not just a fourth down type of thought process. But, you heard some of these comments from Coach McGuire, and we'll take a listen here in just a moment to a comment from Zach Kittley regarding some of what's gone on as far as, I don't know if it's evolving or it's just changing your mind or thinking about some things differently, but there seems to be a change of some kind as it relates to maybe the way that you're approaching taking some risks, some of that being on fourth down. Here's offensive coordinator Zach Kittley talking about that.
We've changed. As you guys know, I heard somebody asking the question to Coach earlier. We've changed our fourth down approach a little bit, and so I'm being a little more aggressive on third downs, trying to really get the first down versus play for that magic number. And so again, man, it kind of just depends on what they're giving us, man. Like we had a play where we threw Josh Kelly a deep sell route on 3rd and long, and they kind of came out in a defense that they hadn't shown at all, and they kind of went blitz cover 0 almost type look with the backside safety there, but on the backside, key and 1, and Tahj came up and gave some time for Barron, and Barron stood in there and made a really good throw, and they went drop 8 a couple times, and so we hit some of those hitch throws that we knew would be there all week, and man, Josh just does such a good job getting open, and Barron has confidence in him, and he's a guy that we like to try to get the ball to on 3rd downs, to those money situations. Josh has been really solid for us, so just keep trying to work him getting the ball.
Really fascinating to hear, and maybe I'm just kind of naive from a fan standpoint to think that you're always just trying to get a 1st down. And I know that on 1st down may not be exactly the same approach as in some other contexts, and I think most would assume that given the context of a game, like the point at which it's happening or the score, there are times where okay, we're going to go for it on 4th down because the game is calling for that. So you do think about that type of quote-unquote magic number, say, on a 3rd down play. But I was wondering if you could expand a little bit further on that magic number or what that exactly means, and maybe how big a shift this actually is, because it kind of sounds like maybe it's a little more significant than I assumed.
I think if you go into a game and you're a big underdog, or if you get way behind, I think that alters their thinking. I think right now they've been playing with a lead in a lot of these games, and so they haven't felt the need to have to, operate that way. I think so that's factoring in. I think you've shown to be not a very good team on 4th down. You're 3 of 10 on the year. I mean, prime example, and I think Joey, like he was trying to make a point, and he wasn't trying to like call Tahj out, because he's like, dude, I'm never going to sit up here and like call Tahj Brooks out. However, and it was the 1 4th down that you had the other night versus Cincinnati. They call an outside zone play. And if you go back and watch it, he maybe goes for 50 or 60 yards. He comes back to the sideline after he cut it up inside, which was not the play that was called. And he's like, I just felt like I needed to get a foot. And so I just kind of – and that's one of your best players and your captains and your leader that just kind of did the wrong thing, okay? But the point is they're just not operating very well on 4th down for whatever that is. And here's you another number. On the 7 4th downs that you have not converted, you have given up 38 points on those drives afterward for the opposition. Hey! So not only, and that's just the way it's worked out. So not only are you not converting, but your defense is not able to be the fireman like Tim DeRuyter talks about and come put the fire out. So they are not handling that part well when you don't convert and they get put on. They've not all been short fields. Some of these have been operating around the 50, but which I think was the case the other night against Cincinnati. But they have not handled that part well. So I think that Joey has said, we've taken the analytics book, we've brought it down to the field. I can look at it myself. I can have a face-to-face conversation, and I'm going off a feel a bit more. As he put it, the book doesn't know that Tahj Brooks wasn't playing in Pullman, Washington. That's the unknown, the weather, momentum, all the stuff that we've talked about. And so they've backed way off, I think. And some of the situation has dictated it, but I think also it's about trying to know what your team is and is not. And right now they're not very good on 4th down.
That's really interesting. And I think one thing to not just gloss over that you stated at the very beginning is the context of these previous 2 games or 3 games as well, where you've been able to be a front runner for the majority of them. You've been on your home field, and so maybe you haven't also been back in some of those situations where you were feeling as either desperate or willing to take a risk, and wondering if that will remain the same Saturday night in Tucson. If it changes and you're in some of those situations, I wonder if you revert back to that. Do you still kind of maintain, aside, again, from just totally blatantly obvious situations where you're really down and you got no choice? I mean, the time is not on your side or anything like that. But I'm talking otherwise what we've seen in some years gone by, which have been outside of those situations, but still big risks taken and sometimes paying off, sometimes not paying off. It's just still, and maybe I should just get used to it, but it's still crazy to me to hear you just mentioned that we've gone for it already 10 times as we're sitting here at the beginning of October. That ain't your granddaddy's football. I know that, but I don't know if any of this is our granddaddy's football. So.
And that's far, I think that's far less than it was a year ago.
You're probably right.
Really, yeah, I really do. Because they were all in with this stuff, as we knew, because in the year one, it worked. I mean, it worked like gangbusters. And it was kind of taking people off guard. And you and I are sitting here trying to process it and like, okay, this is so wild to me. But I think that, I just go back to what Joey said to me at the tail end of last year. We have to know what we are sooner this year than we did last year. And he's talking about last year's team. And I think part of what he's saying to you is, I'm grasping that this is some things we're not great at right now, so I'm not going to push it, and it's more of a feel thing. Now, having said that, if it's 28-14 entering the fourth quarter on Saturday night, and you're trailing and you're looking at the clock and you're looking, okay, well, I'm down 2 scores and there's a manageable situation, you probably are going for it, because then you start going, how many more times am I going to get the ball? Right. We can't play scared. We can't be worried about getting blown out. We've got to, if we've got a situation that we can attempt to take advantage of right now, we've got to try to do it, because we may not be in this situation again. So there's some of that too. But if you go, look at the last 2 weeks. I mean, you've largely, when you're sitting there at 41-27, or you're sitting there at 30-16 later in these games, you're kind of holding them off. You're not trying to be aggressive, and you're trying to be smart with it. You never were in that situation, I guess, against North Texas, and you got so far behind. And I have to go back and look at how many times you went for it on 4th down in Pullman. But that would have been a situation that would have called for it, because it's like, we got to make something happen. And that's when you don't have obviously your lead back. So it has been interesting, though. There's definitely been a change. I think people have noticed it. And it's not that we've seen, your punter that much more. I mean, he hasn't punted that many times this season, but it's just that you've tweaked the way you're thinking about it. And I think part of that is looking in the mirror a little bit, knowing what you are or you aren't. And I go back to too, like, I think some of the Conyer stuff on 4th downs, if one person makes a block, or if Tahj goes outside like he was told to do instead of inside, maybe but for whatever reason, some of that is not happening. So I think you're trying to be more calculated with it.
Yeah, I think even with a little bit of a change in the mindset, I still would not expect or view this team under Coach McGuire to become, some ultra conservative punt machine. I think there's still obviously a tendency towards being aggressive, but we have seen previously a tendency towards like being suicidal. I think it's been beyond like aggressive. Sometimes it's like, what in God's name are we doing? And I even go back to Washington State before the game was out of hand. I mean, there were moments where you're doing some of that. And to me, I guess maybe I'm a little bit, I allow the defensive aspect to weigh too heavily, but I'm just constantly thinking, forgive me, I'm a Tech fan, I'm guilty of this. I'm constantly thinking about, all right, how can we help out the defense as a team? And sometimes putting them in those short field situations, obviously not going to be a great recipe for a defense that is struggling. I think Texas Tech's defense statistically so far this season still has one of the worst starting field positions of any FBS team. But there are so many things to consider as to when or how or why you're going to do this. I expect them to still be aggressive. I think I still want them to obviously be aggressive. But it's interesting to hear that change, and it kind of ties back maybe to our conversation yesterday where you, like you're talking about, you sort of figure out your identity in a way and saying, what are we good at? What are we not good at? What do we need to compensate for?
When we were talking pass rush. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I mean, I go back to that win in Ames in Joey's first year, and I think they really were happy to trot the punter out that night because, again, the book doesn't know that it's 0 degrees or that nobody's really being able to move the football, and you were playing field position that night. So they have shown the ability to adapt. I feel like you're going to get into and so I just think this is the way it's going to be. You're going to get into probably a a very close game Saturday night and probably several times this year, and you're trying to and there may come a time where, like, if you don't take a calculated risk, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that there's part of that too. And you don't know until you try it. And then if it doesn't work, people will go, if you just would have punted, then, you know, we would have won. But it comes down when you get into these games, sometimes it comes down to, you know, those margins, and they're really, really small. And
no doubt.
Like I said, I mean, Cincinnati, if their kicker goes 4 for 4, instead of you making all your kicks, we're having a different conversation right now, or possibly, you know, with that. So,
hey, well, if we get the interception, we're probably in victory formation at the end, so we can
this
spin
is true
this wheel
too. Yeah,
both ways.
You're right. You're right.
And by the way, it's enjoyable to be in this seat because hindsight is never in short supply on a podcast. We've got plenty of that to work with and form our opinions based on. So try to keep that in mind as well. Chris, enjoyed it, my man. Only a couple more left to roll here this week before we get ready for the Wildcats on Saturday night. So looking forward to it, and appreciate your time as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Maybe talk a little Wildcats when we resume our show, our lovely show, I should say. Yeah. So
yeah, we'll get into a Wildcat download, hear from their head coach. Sure. We'll get back to talking maybe rekindling of some border conference beef, which I've been looking forward to for a long time. Plenty more still to come here this week on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks so much to the everydayers that are always out there mixing it up with us, and appreciate those who are doing the same in the YouTube comments. That's one of the best ways to help us grow the show. Hope you'll get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you are not a Matador Mob insider yet, what are you waiting for? That's where it's really going down. So check out the show notes for the link there. You can try on a free 14-day trial. That's your direct line to Chris and I with one-on-one text straight to your phone. Of course, some customized content and conversation. Was talking Looney Tunes with the gal on Saturday morning, I believe, just a totally non-football variety conversation, although that's kind of how I get my mind right. So maybe it was somewhat adjacent, but anything and everything on your mind, we're chopping it up with you there in the Matador Mob Insiders group. So check it out in the show notes or on our Twitter page at Locked On Tech if you haven't so far. Thanks for those who have joined us within that group up to this point, growing every day. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.